Well, now we're going to deal with a topic we can all learn something from, and that is how to deal effectively with conflict in 6 basic steps. And joining us is the author of, I love this book title, Be Yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Everyone else is taken. Welcome back, speaker and coach Mike Robbins. Good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you guys.
So, let's talk about conflict a little bit. It can be so damaging and debilitating. What are some of the more serious effects that conflict can have in our daily lives?
Well, I mean, we see the examples of it all over the place in a big way in our culture, but I actually think on a personal level, what's more damaging, Spencer, often than the conflict itself, is us not dealing with it. So a lot of times in our relationships or at work or with our families, it's the lack of dealing with the conflict that then creates a much bigger conflict.
Is that because people tend to be afraid of conflict?
We're pretty conflict phobic in our culture, particularly here in the Bay Area. You know, we're so nice. We don't want to upset people. So we don't deal with it. And then as we know, it often becomes more of a problem later on.
It explodes possibly later.
Exactly.
So you have some tips on how to deal with it, like resolve it, basically.
Yeah.
Right? The first one is take responsibility.
Yeah, so one of the things we got to remember, even though often it seems like it's them,
Yes.
it always takes 2 to tango. So we got to really own the conflict, the issue ourselves, or if it's in a group, we're part of it. And if we can start to take some responsibility, then we can actually do something to start addressing it. When we're in the blame game, nothing ever gets resolved.
Right.
Yeah. And you talk about addressing it. We need to address it directly.
Directly.
Not talk around the issue.
Absolutely. Look, there's 2 ways to resolve a conflict in life. Either deal with it directly or let it go. And we often do what I call choose door number 3, which is hold a grudge and then tell other people about it, thinking it's going to get better. But one of my favorite sayings about holding a grudge is that holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
it never
true.
works.
That's true.
Okay, seek first to understand.
Yeah, so this can be tough, especially when it's a really emotional conflict. But if we can actually listen and understand where the other person's coming from, we don't have to agree with it, we don't have to like it.
Right.
But if we can listen to it, you know, Dr. King had a great quote. He said, "We have no morally persuasive power with those who can feel our underlying contempt for them." So if I'm angry with you, which is normal, and I'm trying to pretend that I'm being nice to listen to you, I actually have to do whatever I can to understand where you're coming from. Then we can start to deal with it more effectively.
Great concept, yeah. You talk about using I statements.
Yeah.
Well, give us some examples. What do you mean by that?
An I statement is really just, you know, it's owning it ourselves. So a lot of times, as soon as we use the word you, you know, like if my wife says to me, "You always leave the lights on," right? Immediately, even if that's often true, I'll get defensive and say, "Well, no, Thursday night I turned them off." Or, you know what? But if you can use an I statement and really say, "I think, I feel," and make it about yourself, then it's not an accusation. And one of the distinctions I like to talk about is the distinction between our opinions and our truth.
Yeah. What's
so
the difference?
An opinion, now they're similar, but an opinion, like let's just say, Spencer, you and I are friends and you're upset with me and you have an opinion about me, like Mike, you know, you really can be kind of hard to deal with sometimes, or you're really kind of a jerk sometimes, right? Now, I'm going to get defensive about that, right? Yeah. Even if there's, again, some truth to it and we're friends, but if you then tell me, as opposed to that opinion, what's your truth? Hey, Mike, I notice sometimes when we get together, I feel a little frustrated. Or the other day when we were hanging out, I noticed, you know, you started to get argumentative with me, and all of a sudden I felt like I didn't really want to engage.
Gotcha.
Now you're telling me how it is for you, and I can't argue with that.
Because that's my truth.
That's your experience.
How I honestly feel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, that's your opinion, and that's how you
Well, the
truthfully
opinion
feel.
often is filled with righteousness. The truth is usually filled more with emotion.
Yeah.
So if, you know, again, another normal opinion, and I know you just recently got married, this is a classic one that women often have for men, is that men should listen more. But if you tell your husband, Janelle, you really should listen more, he's going to get defensive about that. But if you let him know, hey, I just noticed when we were talking, here's how I was feeling. As you were watching TV when we were talking, I just started to feel like I'm not so important, and then I started to feel upset about that and a little insecure. Now you're letting him know what the experience is, and when people get a real feeling of their experience with other people, it can often influence them to shift their behavior.
Now, does that help create the win-win situation you talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it, that's the 5th step, is create a win-win. And I know that gets thrown around a lot. I do a lot of work in the corporate world, win-win, all this win-win stuff. But what it really means is conflict isn't about me winning and you losing, or you winning and me losing, because it then turns into literally like personal or even corporate, you know, gang fighting. It's like, you won that one, but I'm going to get you next time.
Yeah.
And there's no real resolution. So if we're trying to win, we're actually not interested in resolution. We're interested in some ego trip.
Exactly.
We got to look at what's going to be a win for both people. And then the final step, and this is what a lot of my work and both my books are really all about at some level, is acknowledge and appreciate the other person. Most of us are scared of conflict. it brings up a lot of emotion. I teach it and talk about it and write about it, but I get nervous too when I have a conflict.
Sure.
If we can really thank the other person for being honest and really, hey, I appreciate you being willing to tell me this, even if it gets a little uncomfortable, it's actually a sign of respect and almost of love if we can have conflicts with each other and work them out.
Wow.
Good advice,
This is
Mike
really
Robbins,
great advice. All of these tips are on our website, and Mike, you always
What a
bring
great
such
book.
wisdom and helpful advice to the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me back.
Great.